Welcome, Aggies. This is a overview of action research. It will form the basis for your last article test for the semester, but maybe more importantly, it is very highly related to um, your proposal that you'll be writing here soon. So if you look at the screen here, you can see that the name of the article that I'll be reviewing for you is Education in Rural County Jails, Need versus Opportunity. I will go ahead and state that I recognize that this is quite an old article, and that's okay for the purposes now. It was published in 2006, but it's a fairly easy article to read for students, and so I've used it for quite a while, simply for those purposes because it's the statistics are really easy to read, and we'll talk about some things that actually make this an action article. So, by definition, action articles are completed or the studies are completed to answer a very specific question in a very specific place in a very specific time for a very specific purpose. So action research quite often happens within this case a jail setting. You see it quite often in school settings. You see it in hospital settings. You see it, in corporate offices. The specific purpose of action research is to answer, again, that specific question for a specific group of people at a specific time, etc. Having said that, some action research has enough control. Basically, we're saying that some action research has followed the procedures that you've been studying since the day after finals ended this semester, but it has enough of control. They followed good procedures in terms of getting subjects. They've got an instrument that's valid and reliable. We'll talk about that a little bit here. But the researchers have enough control that the research that they conduct can possibly or could possibly be published. And so that's what you're seeing in front of us here. We'll see at the very end of this article that the Jeremiah G. that wrote this finished up his master's degree and works at an area of assessment within somewhere in, I think, Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. But he actually teaches GED classes to individuals that are incarcerated in a county jail. So my speculation is that what we're reading here was actually part of maybe his master's thesis. So he was completing this research to actually graduate, but he also did something that could help him in his job. And he had some interesting findings, and so he probably wrote this article, submitted it to the Journal of Correctional Education. They accepted it and published it. Was his primary goal to get published? Probably not. Reading this, you can tell that he has a love for and enjoys maybe his job of teaching people who are incarcerated. So he really wanted to know what do the people incarcerated think about the programs? What do they like? What do they dislike? What are the needs? And so I think that's why he did this. Yeah, it helped him probably graduate with his master's degree. But I think as we go through this, you'll see that he really did this to actually help the people that he teaches. So let's get started looking at the article. So again, you've got the information about the journal where it was published. You've got a title. You've got the author. Just like quantitative and qualitative articles, the next thing that we would expect to see is the abstract. And so here is that, again, a summary of what he did, why he did what he did, and then a little bit down at the end of this abstract about what he found. So again, abstracts are abstracts are abstracts. Yes, you will be writing an abstract for your proposal. And so when you see the instructions for that, think back to this article, this video, and maybe fashion it a little bit after this and other articles that we've read during the term, quantitative, qualitative, and now action. So just like other articles that we have read, the next thing that you'll see is a brief introduction And interestingly, in this article, he gives us about 3 or 4 paragraphs here that he talks about um, a little bit of background about what he's doing. Notice in here there's actually only one item that actually is even referenced. So this is more of just background about what he's doing. He does use the term introduction. Remember, for our purposes, introduction and review of literature kind of can be used interchangeably. I will have you use the term introduction for your proposal coming up. And so, really, what he has written as his review of literature is sort of what we're going to talk about in terms of an introduction. Um, Another characteristic of uh, action research is that it is very easy for practitioners to read. And so I'm pointing that out now because as we talk about the review of literature, yes, we're still going to use that inverted triangle perspective where some very broad statements are made at the very beginning. And then as you narrow down the focus, you will, come to the conclusion of this review of literature or introduction and state what the purpose of your project is. Again, having said that, he writes a very nice, easy to read introduction to his research. And I will have us count the number of paragraphs. And again, that's going to be related to your proposal, but we've got 1, 2 things that we can read here. And again, I think I've read the first sentence in several introductions to you, so you can go back and read that and notice how he narrows down the focus from very broad to more specific. So we've got 2 paragraphs here, some statistics. So paragraph 3, 4, and then 5, and then he starts into his introduction. So when you do get to the instructions for your research proposal, I do require about 5 to 7 pages, how about 5 to 7 paragraphs of introduction with a minimum of about 2.5 pages of introduction. So I guess I learned the hard way that not only do I have to specify the number of paragraphs in an introduction, but also the number of pages, because I've had these 5 to 7 paragraphs and I've had someone have a single page with 5 paragraphs on it. So it needs to be something a lot more substantial to introduce your topic and have me, the reader, to be able to see that you're narrowing down the focus. We'll notice here in the last paragraph of the introduction, the current study investigates inmate perception of programs by directly inquiring about satisfaction levels. And again, he gives some other information about reasons for people to participate, and we'll look in a moment about his his inventory, which he actually includes here. So 5 to 7 paragraphs in your introduction to in your proposal, probably a minimum of about 2.5 pages, just to get enough length in there to really introduce your topic. So introduction. Second item in our research articles is our methods. So here's a participant section. Notice here that the tense of his verb is past tense. So participants were all inmates of a rural jail, county jail at the time of the survey. When you write your proposal, you will be writing in future tense. So here he's documenting what he did. You'll be proposing what you plan to do or what you will do. So we could turn this sentence into participants will be inmates of a rural county jail at the time of the survey. So you're proposing something in the future. So he gives, after that, a little bit of background information about how he kind of tried to select these. The total population on the day of the survey was administered was 101. He got 36 total people to take his survey. He gives a little bit of demographic information about his participants. numbers of males, numbers of females, total time of incarceration, age range, etc. I don't see any means in there. But let me stop and say just a little bit about another characteristic of action research is typically the statistical analysis for action research is kind of in the sort of low level of statistics, and really for those of you that particularly just came out of 391, um, descriptive statistics, mean, median, mode, standard deviation, interquartile range, um, correlation, independent or dependent t-tests. You kind of have gone through what are sort of the basics of the foundation for any um, higher level statistics. So you'll see in here that the statistics, and this is again a characteristic of action research, is going to be that it's pretty user friendly. Generally speaking, most practitioners can read it and have a decent understanding. So again, total time of incarceration, different for males and females, age ranges. Most people can actually uh, see and understand that. Notice the last thing, participation was self-selected, and we'll see that down in a procedure section in just a moment. The next section that you see here, he calls apparatus. For our purposes, my purposes, I would actually call this instrument because it's a paper and pencil test. So again, you've written this for me for your quantitative um, data collection. So he talks a little bit about developing that, two different ways of gathering information, open-ended questions, a Likert scale question. He kind of mixed them up throughout. He does give us that document at the end of this. He talks a little bit about not really establishing validity and reliability of the instrument, but that he did do a pilot study for some inmates that probably didn't take the final copy of this, but they probably gave him some feedback. And then he talks a little bit about consulting with his mentor, which kind of again led me to believe that he probably used this for his master's thesis. Anyway, so his apparatus section is our instrument section. The way he wrote his instrument, there's not really a way to come up with a total score. There's not really a way to, analyze like what you guys did, coping competence, and add these up and add those up to give a score. But we'll see in a minute how he did really look at his instrument and how it answered some of his research questions. The third section of his methods documentation is called procedure. I have not had you write a procedure section, but I will have you write it for your research proposal. So the procedures are, how did you collect the data? And you've kind of talked a little bit about this probably in your methods section, but it's sort of like telling someone how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you literally walk someone through the procedure step by step. For a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, retrieve the bread, retrieve the jar of peanut butter, retrieve the jelly. On a plate, get 2 pieces of bread, lay them flat on the plate with a knife, and you can kind of finish that out. So as you read through this, think about just walking the reader on how you actually collected the data. So what he talks about here is he hung a flyer to advertise that he was going to be giving out this survey. It said, wanted your opinion, and on the particular day of the data collection, again, they were self-selected, so they volunteered to participate. He talks about not giving any rewards for participation. And then he talks about taking them into, a multi-purpose room. They were seated. He gave them the informed consent. He gave them the form. He read the instructions to them. They took the survey, and then he collected the survey from the individuals. Um, and then he talks a little bit in here about actually how he analyzed the data. I will probably not have you do that in your procedure uh, section for me, but you do kind of sometimes see this, and I think we've even seen it a couple times at the end of procedure sections in the articles that you've read for me. Um, and then he goes into his results. So we've got introduction, we've got methods, now we've got results. So he kind of gives these results in little groups of topics. And so these first ones are related to some open-ended questions about my leader teacher could be better by, the prison administration could make programs I attend better by, which programs need improvement, how. And so he presents that in table 1. And I think he found some interesting things that would go help him. So for the teachers, one-on-one interaction, more personal connection. For the administration, more programs, more time for programs, keep the good teachers, um, needs of the program. Again, more programs, better communication about the programs, focus on the topic at hand. So we'll jump back up and look at sort of the next section that he talked about. But this was related to I enjoy the program. So these were the Likert scale items. I get what I want out of the programs. I will remain in similar program outside when I am released. So again, I think these are some interesting questions, and the results here are provided based on males and females. And notice here the way his Likert was set up. A -2 meant a negative attitude, and then +2 meant a more positive attitude. And so he actually used something called chi-square, and I kind of zipped through that. But it basically just says, are there differences on these Likert scale items that were not adding up? Because we've added up Likert scales to come up with a composite scale. But you'll notice here, he's doing it per question. And so you can see here that to the question, I enjoy the programs, females tended to have a more positive attitude compared to males. Same things with I get what I want out of the programs. And then males tended to have a higher rate of saying I will remain in similar programs when I'm released. So again, here's some results. And again, pretty easy to sort of review these results. Nextly, he started talking about specific things that they're specifically looking for. And this goes back to some, I'll just went over it, but cognitive control, goal orientation, activity orientation, avoidance. Basically, did they want to learn something? Did they think that the programs help them attain something in the end? So a goal. Activity orientation simply means that they're participating because they want to be around others. And then avoidance posture means I'm doing this because I don't want to do something else, essentially. And so it was interesting because he does talk about, each of these sort of the questions that he asked. But what he found was some of the more positive things, goal orientation and cognitive control. People are participating in his programs because they want to, and they want to get something out of it. They want to attain a goal, and they want to become better. And then the least interesting things, or the least identified things, are these kind of things as a teacher you wouldn't want to be reasons for someone to be coming to your program. So I think those are kind of interesting. I'll come on down here and you can read through these. Again, I think he showed some some data here. Again, it was using chi-square, and he looked at things, you know, between males and females, and then transition scales, drug rehab skills, personal issues, and again, uh, he found significant differences according to chi-square, at least on differences in males and females. But you can read back through and see what he found. And again, he's just giving n equals something, so the number of people who reported um, uh, answers to the question. Here are his question, or here's his question about recidivism. Why do people return to jail, or go to jail, or maybe return to jail? And so, how do people see that? Is it internal factors? Is it external factors? And then finally, he comes down to his last section, conclusion slash discussion, which again is, generally speaking, the last part of a research article. And this is again where the author should be relating his findings back to previous research. So you can read through here. And then he follows up with um, implications for corrections education. So, how can others use this? And again, I think he was probably writing this for this particular setting, but some of this might be generalizable to other contexts, to other corrections facilities. And I think probably, the main thing here that he found was that people in his setting were interested in having classes. They were happy to give feedback. They gave some good suggestions, and they hopefully want to become better people and not go back to jail. So again, some things here related to um, drug related types of education, and getting off drugs and staying away from drugs. So I think those are some things that are important. Um, the last thing here are just a few acknowledgments, um, and then his references. But then I'll point out at the very end, it talks about him recently received his MS in education. And so again, probably this was part of his master's thesis. So again, to summarize, action research done to answer questions in a particular place, time, uh, issue, not necessarily done to be publishable, but possibly is publishable if the um, if the researcher has enough control over the research. If they follow the procedures that you've been studying, it's possible to get action research published. So again, action research will really be the basis of your proposal coming up, and we'll have some office hours related to that. We'll talk about the relationship between the instructions provided and this research. Again, fairly easy to read, low level statistics used, um, and possibly something that you might actually go into your internship and or job and complete now that you have had some study about the research process. So thank you for listening.